Good evening, everyone. This is Hussain Ghariali, your host for this evening. Welcome to this webinar series, Explore Your Mind, an expert talk series. The topic for today's webinar is Rekindle the Heritage for a Healthy Mind. In this webinar, our speaker, Dr. Paranjpe, will share with you the values and cultures for a good quality of life and how one can unlock the true potential of their mind. This talk is a part of a series of webinars. Allow me to introduce Dr. Paranjpe. Dr. Paranjpe is globally recognized for her proficiency in Sanskrit and Indology, study of ancient India. She is a MA from the University of Pune with a PhD in Vedic studies. Her love for languages pushed her to learn German and Russian and further inspired her to teach Sanskrit to non-Indian students. She has taught for a variety of abroad programs in the US, Japan, Romania, among other countries. She has also served as a director of the Associated Colleges of the Midwest Program, Chicago. Till now, she has authored 3 books, numerous research articles, and has given many talks on All India Radio and various such social platforms. Dr. Sucheta mentions beautifully that while her teaching never ends, her learning also will never end. A couple of things that our participants must note before we begin. All participants will remain muted during the presentation. We would request you to add your questions to the chat box. They will be addressed by Dr. Paranjpe at the end of the presentation. Thank you. Over to you, Doctor.
Namaste and welcome to this new venture of InMed Prognostics. In this, we are going to discuss some things, which belong not directly to our mental abilities and health and all those things, but I'm going to speak with you about some of our ancient heritage. And that is important because that is how our mind is created, that is how our brain is developed, and that is how our ego also functions. And so, for what we call in Indian philosophy as Mano, Buddhi, Ahankara, all these things, all the 3 things which are important, are based on our knowledge and acceptance of our history and heritage. And by heritage, I don't just mean, the great sculptures and all those things. So, heritage comes in various ways on different levels. One is, of course, different monuments like Kailash temple, for example, or there are some which come in the form of language. For example, language is a heritage, it comes for years and thousands of years. And the most important is literature. Literature is important for the simplest reason that we read it over and over again, right? And then it has survived for thousands of years. Itself shows you that this is not something like a newspaper. You read it very carefully today and tomorrow you throw it in the dustbin. It's not that. For thousands of years, our literature has survived and percolated to every level of society, which is very important. And that's what I mean, that reading, looking, watching, and even listening, all these things help you to build your mind, intelligence, and ego healthily. And by ego, I don't mean it in the wrong sense. I mean, not thinking too much of yourself, but you know what I mean to say. One such piece of literature, I mean, our tradition, Indian tradition, starts from Rigveda, all the Vedic literature. We won't go into that. But after that come 2 epics. And epics, these 2 epics are Ramayana, which everybody knows, which was composed by Valmiki, and the other one is Mahabharata, right? And this Mahabharata is more popular amongst all of us because we can relate to that. Okay, in Ramayana, everything is ideal, ideal son, ideal husband, ideal brother, everything is ideal. But what happens in actual life is given in Mahabharata, and so it becomes wonderful to read that and sometimes even experience that. There are so many sayings which are told about Mahabharata, but the best one which I like, and I would like to quote a little Sanskrit once in a while. It says, Yad ihasti tad anyatra, yan nehasti na tad kvachit. Whatever is here is seen everywhere, here in the sense in the text of Mahabharata, and whatever is not here will not be seen anywhere at all. In other words, it's an all inclusive and encompassing literature. And so I chose to speak about this text today. Do you remember the first time you heard about Mahabharata? You obviously don't. Do you remember the first book you read about Mahabharata? We don't. Because we are kind of, we grow up with Mahabharata story, and I say Mahabharata, but all our literature. I'll talk only about focus on Mahabharata. And I don't remember the first time I read Mahabharata or first time my probably grandmother told me the story from Mahabharata. So it has been embedded in not only our blood but in our genes, literally. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. But in spite of that, as we grow old or older, we start reading more books about all such literature. And not only that, when it comes to Mahabharata, B.R. Chopra did a great thing when he showed it on television long time back. Mahabharata reached every home. And I do want to make it a point that there are some texts in the world literature, for example, Mahabharata, which are beyond religion, what I would call meta religious text. That is, it has nothing to do with religion. Once in a while, there will be references, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha and all, but that is okay. The main storyline has nothing to do with religion at all, and therefore it becomes universal. In fact, Peter Brooks has made a movie on Mahabharata, and he wanted to show that Mahabharata is universal. You know what he did? It's an amazing movie. You can watch it. It goes on for 4 hours, but still, his Bhishma is an African American. His Duryodhana is Japanese. His other persons are from either America or England or even Southeast Asia. The only Indian person is Mallika Sarabhai, who the dancer, of course, and she is Draupadi. So, what he wants to show and what he wants to imbibe on your mind is that Mahabharata is universal. How many times have we thought of this text as universal text? How many times have we thought of it as meta-religious text? So if we start doing that, and if we change our attitude and approach not only towards Mahabharata, but about anything, then things become clearer and our mind is without any prejudice. That is what we want to do. But I'll tell you some misunderstandings about Mahabharata. Even though we read a lot of books, there are some things which are deep rooted in our mind. I'll ask you one thing. I told you who composed Ramayana. It was Valmiki. And who composed Mahabharata? I don't even have to give you 3 seconds to give me an answer. You know the answer. The answer is Vyasa. And if I tell you, by the way, let me tell you one thing before I start saying anything. I have worked in the Mahabharata project of the prestigious Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute from Pune. And every time we refer to Mahabharata, we, in the sense, the Sanskritists refer to Mahabharata, we refer to the critical edition which has been brought out by that particular organization. And when I say something, please, in your Q&A session, don't ask me, but B.R. Chopra has said this. He is not the authority. The authority is the original Sanskrit text. So if I tell you that Mahabharata was not written by Vyasa, would you believe me? So what did Vyasa do? Why is his name always connected with that? You know the story. Kauravas and Pandavas, the cousins, they fought over power, satta. And see, this has been going on for so many years. All the politics, even all the domestic quarrels are about some kind of satta, right? And then Pandavas won, the Kauravas were very badly lost, and all those things. Forget about that. But Pandavas thought, very smart move, just see, very smart move. They realized that this must be documented. How would the world know that hundreds of years ago Pandavas won a war and Kauravas were, all of them were completely annihilated? And therefore they requested Vyasa to write a book about, not exactly a book, I called it a war chronicle. It was a war chronicle which they said will tell us how great Pandavas are and how bad and evil Kauravas were. So Vyasa wrote that. It was only around 8,000 to 9,000 shlokas. Shloka is a verse. And it was called Jaya. Jaya means victory, you all know that. And it was called Jaya. In fact, it was called Jaya Itihasam Puratanam. You can understand these words. Puratanam is old, ancient, and Itihasa is history. So this is what happened, right? Vyasa wrote Jaya, and then he gave a copy each, manuscript copy, to his son and four of his disciples. They went in all different directions, except one, Vaishampayana, stayed with Pandavas. And these four people, they went in four directions and they promulgated and prompted everybody to read these texts and spread the news of what had happened. Fine. Now, this person who stayed back in Kurukshetra, in Hastinapur, his name was Vaishampayan. And then Pandava's grandson, great grandson, you know Janamejaya, Abhimanyu's son, he became the king. So, you know, in between there are at least 200 years gone. In spite of the fact that the War Chronicle is written, which gives you the details of only what happened on day 1, what happened on day 2 and 3, nothing else, no other history and story at all. Janamejaya, when he was listening to the story of the war, he asked Vaishampayana, but why did they fight in the first place? What was the reason? He said, okay, I'll tell you the story. And he started telling the story of why they fought. And then he talked about Dyuta and Anudyuta and Dyuta. Do you mean to say my ancestors played gambling and they lost? He said, yeah, you know, I'll tell you that story also. So, one by one, there were more and more stories about his great grandparents. Now, just tell me one thing. In spite of the fact that today we have so many records and documentation, photos, and all, if I ask you, do you know the name, full name of your great great grandfather? I'm sure 90% of the people will not know that, and 10% of the people would think they know, but probably that may not be true. So obviously, Janmejaya didn't know anything, and therefore the stories of Bharata dynasty, this Kuru Vamsha is also known as Bharata dynasty, and therefore these stories were added on. Now see, this is Jaya the core, and all these stories of Bharatas are added on. So it became not only 9,000 verses now, but 24,000. And just imagine that it is no longer Jaya, because war is only a part of it, one third, and therefore it is called Bharata. Now it is no more called Jaya, it's Bharata. So see how it has developed, and see how our misunderstandings are about the authorship of Mahabharata. And the last thing, what happened was, after maybe around 400 years, see, it is difficult to tell any dates, In Sanskrit literature, we never talk about dates, we talk about period. And what do I mean by period? 7th century AD or whatever. So we give a list. Mahabharata was composed, this is the scholarly conclusion, it was composed between 400 AD, 400 BC to 400 AD. Can you believe it's a span of almost 1000 years, 800 years? So this is how we go. So after around 4 to 500 years, in Naimisharanya, there was a yajna. I do not like to translate the word yajna as sacrifice because that is something very different. So, and everybody knows what is yajna. In that yajna, somebody, in any yajna, for example, at evening, they come together and they discuss things which are not exactly related to that particular yajna, but things around it. Just that we have cultural programs in a conference or a workshop, similarly. And this yajna was supposed to go on for 12 years. People and scholars and shastris and pandits had come from all over India to attain this. One of the rishis said, "Hey, you know something? I have heard about a big battle which was fought somewhere on Kurukshetra. Does anybody know about it?" Nobody knew, but one person came up. Suta. Suta is a bard. He is a semi-historian. And this Suta said, "I know. I was taught about this war and I have heard a lot of stories about this." And he started telling the story of Mahabharata. Have you played the game Chinese Whisper or Kangoshti in Marathi language? You tell one thing to the other tells it to the third one, and when it comes out of the mouth of 10th, it is entirely different. So, similarly, when Suta started telling the stories, everybody remembered something or other, and they all came together and told stories. So, just imagine how Mahabharata is growing up. Every rishi had something to add. In other words, the final redaction of the text was done not by one man but by many men at different times from different places. And that is why you do not expect a consistency in Mahabharata. Whatever it is, you will realize now that when all these, you will be surprised, the entire Ramayana is included in Mahabharata. Can you believe that? There are so many things. There is Gita, Vishnu Sahasranam, there are other Upakhyanas, that is subsidiary stories, parenthetical stories. All these come there, and this is how from 24,000 it grew. It actually swelled up, it swelled up to 100,000 verses, 1 lakh verses, and therefore it was no longer Bharata, it was Mahabharata, that is the great Bharata text, bigger Bharata text, and that is how Mahabharata came into being. Now you would realize actual Mahabharata was not written by Vyasa, it was composed by so many people over so many centuries. Now, why is this story important to us? It is important to us because it shakes us, it awakens up. Because all that we have learnt up till now is not false, it is partly true, but partly you have to know many other things also. So, and this is what we learn from our past, our heritage, our mythology, our philosophy, our literature also, how things change. And it is important to have a clean slate. Before you start reading any text, you must have a clean slate of mind and then look at that text and go ahead. Okay? So, this much for the story of how Mahabharata was composed. I'm not here to give you advice or to ask you to change your attitude or anything of that sort. But what I want you to know is we always judge the book by its cover, right? We do not go deeper into it, which is not right. We should not judge anything, nor any people also, and we should not label them as good and bad, nice and evil. We don't have to do that at all, and that is what I want to say. The second misunderstanding about Mahabharata, which is very interesting, I have assumed that you all know the story, at least the basic storyline of the entire Mahabharata. Now just imagine the death of Bhishma. I'm going to talk about that. Incidentally, there is a big controversy about what Bhishma, when he died. And he died at the ripe age. Pandavas were his grandsons, and Pandavas' sons and grandsons were fighting the war. So he becomes a great great grandfather, and therefore Pandavas and Bhishmas were very old. Bhishma was older, of course. Age no bar. Age is something which never deters you from doing anything, so long as you are, again, mano buddhi ahankara. Shankaracharya has said this. So long as your mano buddhi and ahankara are working fine, you are fine, whatever your chronological age, right? So therefore, when Bhishma fell down, you have heard the story of how he was kept on a Shara Panjara, and then he died when the Uttarayana started, the summer solstice started. And therefore, he said, now I'm going to die, but I have to wait for some more days till I actually breathe my last. And then we are told that they made a bed out of arrows. Shara is arrows, and kept Bhishma on that. And he was lying there for some nights there and days. Do you really think that any person would do that? Do you think that people would keep his own grandsons and children and grandchildren and all those things? Will they ever do that? So, why do we always have this misunderstanding that he was kept on the bed of arrows, and these arrows, which are made out of iron, which are very sharp, how would they do that, such a cruel thing? The thing is, in Sanskrit, one word has many meanings. If you read that, you would realize that Shara also means soft grass. And by soft grass, it's a very peculiar type of grass. There are different types of grasses, so to say. There is Shara, there is Darbha, there is Kusha. We know all those things. And they had made a soft bed of a soft grass and kept him there. But nobody bothers to think of it in this way. Why? Because we don't want to change our process of thoughts. And secondly, remember, we all love myths. Whether you like it or not, we love myths. We love stories. And these are the stories not only from Mahabharata but from all over the ancient world literature that we want to believe that. We want to believe in fairies. We want to believe in lions who laugh and say something to the jackal. So we all love myths, and therefore these stories have come. I would talk about only two more things. One is, it is popularly said that it was Draupadi who, in their forest dwelling, Vanavasa, got this thali, a plate from uh, someone, great person, which would always give ample food to as many people as would come there for food. This was not the case. It was Yudhishthira who was worried because, contrary to the popular belief, in the Vanavasa, Pandavas had built huge mansions, they had servants, they were very well off. There were hundreds of Brahmins who were accompanying them all the time, and who will feed them. So he did some upasana, and sun god Surya gave him what is known as Akshaya Patra. Okay, and therefore it is important to know all these things, because unless and until we go to the truth, unless and until we see the original text, we read the translations, we don't know who is what. For example, it is commonly believed that Pandavas were always grey and Kauravas were always bad, or actually evil. But believe me, no man, whether you belong to Pandava side or Kaurava side, is 100% good or 100% bad. And we cannot do this injustice to Kauravas, nor should we eulogize Pandavas to its extreme. So, what I want you to know, I don't want to tell the story of Mahabharata. I want to teach you the approach to reading any book. Even if it's a new book, read with a clean slate. Read it with open mind and without any prejudices of whether it is B.R. Chopra or Iravati Karve or Rajachari or anybody, or Oberoi. He has written a wonderful book. He was the president of Niti Ayoga, and I would recommend some of the books to you that you should read them. And so, Mahabharata is only a tool. Mahabharata is only an excuse. But the most important thing is to keep your Manobuddhi Ahankara fresh, to keep your Manobuddhi Ahankara non maligned by any prejudices. You must have a clean and open mind and then go ahead. Whether it is about talking to people, making new relationships, reading books, or even watching a movie. Don't watch a movie because somebody said it's wonderful. But you decide for yourself, you make your own choices, and that is important. Now, I have been a teacher all my life, and I would like to ask questions. Before you start your Q&A, I would like to ask you questions and try to give me those answers, or at least do them for yourself. I'll ask you only two questions. What was the first one is, what was the name of Draupadi's mother? Okay, we know that Draupadi's father is King Drupada, but what was the name of her mother? She obviously had a mother, a biological mother who gave her a birth. Again, that's the myth or a story, that she came out of fire. No 25-year-old girl would come out of flames of fire with all the clothes worn on and all. So she was born. Anyway, we won't go into that details, but I would like to know the name of Draupadi's mother. And secondly, we talk about 100 Kauravas, right? By 100, according to me, it means many. Doesn't mean, it's not a mathematically precise numbers like 93, 94, 95, 100. It is not that. 100, Shatam is many, a lot. Give me the names of at least 6 Kauravas. And if you do that, be sure that you have understood Mahabharata very well. And even if you can't do it right away, I would urge you, request you to go to libraries, find out. And I'm an old timer, so I say libraries, you can go maybe on the net and ask the search engine to give you the names. But that way, you would come to know a lot more about Mahabharata, and that is why I began this series, talk series with Mahabharata. Thank you very much. And now I'm open to the answer and question answer series. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we move to the Q&A session, we have a short video on NeuroShield, which we would like to present to you.
How often do you use your brain? At this question most people chuckle or laugh. But the fact is we all use our brains all the time. Have you ever thought of your brain's health proactively? Almost never. Part of the reason is because we don't have reliable tools which will help us manage our brain's health. So, we at NeuroShield have come up with a solution where we offer cloud-based clinical decision support tool for neurological disorders. NeuroShield is an artificial intelligence and machine learning-based tool helps neuroradiologists, neurophysicians and psychiatrists understand the brain better and offer evidence-based diagnostics. The current challenges, which are operational and clinical problems. All the existing solutions addressing these problems are expensive, time-consuming and don't provide contextual results based on age, ethnicity and gender. NeuroShield, the solution which combines the latest tools in medical and technological advancements. The common practice for doctors is to perform a neuropsychological assessment and ask for an MRI to help in diagnosing brain degenerative diseases like epilepsy and dementia. But visual MRI reading can many times provide non-conclusive information, resulting in misdiagnosis. Our software, NeuroShield, makes it possible to look clearly at the region of interest, like hippocampus, compute brain volumes, and supported by cutting-edge research and imaging analytics can help physicians reach more reliable and conclusive diagnosis conventional method. NeuroShield is the platform that aggregates insights from relevant modalities to provide holistic health and wellness insights. These are some snapshots of the platform provided with the test reports and volumetric analysis. Our competitive advantage matrix are as follows. Our vision is to bring affordable, accessible, reliable and evidence-based health prognostic tools in India and other emerging markets. Reach out to us and get to know more.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would request you to paste your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A section, and Dr. Paranjpe will address them shortly. Thank you. Dr. Paranjpe, we have a question from the audience.
Yes.
Is the current situation about politics comparable to Mahabharata? People killing each other and troubling each other? Your comments, please.
I told you Mahabharata is universal. It's universal not only in place, but also in time, you know. It has never stopped. Right from Mahabharata times to 2021, the situation has not changed at all. And as you know, when something bad happens, we say, oh, Mahabharata happened there. But now that you have asked me this question, let me give you a name of a beautiful book. It is by Shashi Tharoor, one of my favorite authors. And it is something like The Great Indian Epic and the Independence Struggle. Please read this book and you will be surprised to see how the Mahabharata situation and the Indian, before pre-independence India, the struggle, he has shown the similarity and parallelism so wonderfully. You would read that and then you would like to know more about Mahabharata and politics. But believe me, mainly it is the center is power. It's always a struggle for power.
Thank you, Dr. Paranjpe, for such a wonderful response. We have another question. What are some of the principles that we could learn from the story of Mahabharata that we could apply to our lives and enrich our minds to lead better lives?
Actually, the entire epic is what we call, we in the sense, in the circles of literary criticism, we call it didactic poetry. Now, what do you mean by didactic poetry? It is poems which want to teach you something, but they don't teach you directly that don't do this or do that. Never. But they would tell you how when somebody does the wrong thing, he's punished for it, and somebody does a good thing, he is rewarded. So, this is what even the entire text of Mahabharata is doing for you. Okay. So, see, for example, Gita. You all must have read Gita or you must have heard of Gita sometime in your life. And whatever it tells you is important. I'll give you only one example. It says, do not expect the fruit of the work that you do. I wouldn't say work, the karma that you do. No apeksha. Is that possible? You know how difficult it is? I mean, if you listen to people talking to each other, especially women, they would say, I called her for lunch 10 times and she not invited me even once. So such kind of expectations which start from very basic things to higher things are always there. It's impossible to give the list of all those, but especially in two parvans called Bhishma Parva and Anushasan Parva, there is so much Upadesha, which is amazing. I'll give you only one example. I mean, example not from Mahabharata, but one text tells you that how should a piece of literature teach you or advise you. And it says, Kanta Sammita Tayopadesha Yuje. It should teach you things like a wife teaches a husband. She doesn't tell him, she doesn't order him directly, but tells him, don't you think this will be better? And then this is how she gets her work done. So this is what Mahabharata does too.
Doctor, there's another question.
Sure.
You mentioned ego in your talk.
Yes.
And there is one side of the coin, which is ego, and there is self-respect. And how shall one differentiate between the two?
Okay. See, I use the words mano, buddhi, ahankara, mainly because these three come from a stotra, from a devotional song by Shankaracharya. Okay. Secondly, Patanjali in his Yoga Sutra, who talks about mind all the time, chitta, he uses the word chitta there. He also uses the word ahankara. Ahankara popularly is translated into English as ego, right? You know what ego means literally? In Latin, the word ego means I am. So that is how the word ego comes, and especially in English, the word is used in that particular sense because I always wonder why in Roman script, when you talk about yourself, I is always capital, whether it comes at the beginning of a sentence or end of a sentence, it's always there. But what I mean by ahankara, I would like to translate it as self-esteem. Not only self-confidence, but self-esteem, which comes because of your fusion of mana and buddhi together. Hopefully, maybe we can talk about mano, buddhi, ahankara sometime later.
Thank you, Doctor. Another question that we have from our attendees. In what context is Mahabharata related to the present mind? How can one apply it to the current situation with the pandemic and all of the difficulties humankind has faced?
Whether it is pandemic or war or whatever, plague or anything else, What Mahabharata teaches you is that in spite of the fact that the situation is difficult, there is a solution. And if you find that solution, it depends on you. It depends on your mind. It depends on your ability to think. And that is very important. Nobody can teach you the solution. You have to think of a solution. And so Mahabharata will help you in that. And for that, the crux of Mahabharata philosophy, you see mainly in maybe, I would say, Gita. And therefore, that is how it will help you to change your approach towards life and be more successful. Successful in the sense, happier in your mind.
Another question by one of our attendees: where can we find the original manuscripts or some simplified versions of Mahabharata so that the learning can be imparted to our generation of kids?
Yeah, right.
There is a book, kindly suggest. Yes.
Yes, I'm so glad, that you want to already hand over this knowledge and this great epic to our next generation. So there are so many versions, but like I said, Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute collected so many manuscripts, and after studying these manuscripts for more than 60 years, there were scholars and professors and students, research assistants who worked and read all those manuscripts in Sharada Lipi, that is in the scripts of Sharada, Brahmi, Nepali, Javanese, everything, and they have published a critical edition. Okay, we always refer to that. Now, there are so many books about Mahabharata, but the best ones are, according to me, the best ones are those, which are meant for children, because it is Mahabharata simplified. What we want from Mahabharata is basically, at least at the beginning, we want the storyline. We don't want the accompanying philosophy in the beginning. There is not one book that I can think of, but this book, or the coffee table book, it is called coffee table book, but it is this big and very heavy, by Mr. Oberoi, who was the president of Niti Aayog, is something which is worth looking at. Please go and see that. It's available in all the libraries. And if you can, if you come to Bhandarkar Institute, you will see all those old manuscripts and also the critical edition and also Oberoi's book.
Thank you, Doctor, for your advice. Another question that we have from our fellow attendees. There has been conversation that Mahabharata affects our health and mind adversely at times. It might be hearsay, but what are your comments on this?
What a question. I mean, I like the question because it is popularly believed that if you bring Mahabharata, the text of Mahabharata, if you buy a book of Mahabharata and keep it in your house will be ruined, because this is what happened to Mahabharata people. But tell me, Vanu, in fact, when I bought the entire 18 Parvans of Mahabharata, my mother-in-law was furious. She said, "Do you mean to say you're going to keep them in the house?" I said, "Yeah, I mean, I want to study them." She told me that then Mahabharata will happen in our house. To be honest, you don't need a copy of the text to have Mahabharata in the house. And secondly, when you buy say a murder mystery, do you murder somebody in the house? You obviously don't. So that depends on your mindset, Look at it as a text. Look at it as our literary heritage. Look at it as history, and don't look at it as something you want to bring each and every letter into your behavior, and then bringing Mahabharata text home is no problem at all.
Another very interesting question from the audience.
Yes.
In this world of stimulation, where we have so many things to attract our attention, how does one get rid of addiction of anything, maybe mobile phones or fast food? Or how does one control and train their mind to be disciplined?
I think this question is kind of tangential to Mahabharata. It doesn't anyway is connected with Mahabharata, but I would still answer that you have to keep your mind cool. I don't want to call it dhyana or meditation or vipassana or anything, but just by reading, now that I am a person who belongs to the ancient Indian literature and heritage, let me tell you one thing. Whichever your religion, whichever your language, if you start chanting some stotras, maybe they are Shankaracharya stotras or maybe they are Gregorian chants from Christianity, whatever it is, you will be surprised that chanting helps you. Even if you first don't understand the meaning, chanting helps you. And sorry, that can start the process and then you will find the ways on your own.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any other questions for Dr. Paranjpe, kindly paste them in the chat box or the question answer section.
But I'm quite glad that only 30 minutes of Mahabharata and you have already started thinking about it. You want to read it. You want to give it to your younger generation. I think in that case, the purpose of giving this talk is fulfilled. And I'm glad for that.
If there are not any more questions, we would like to conclude the Q&A session at this point. We would give our audience another minute or so in case they have any other questions for Dr. Paranjpe. Another question: why are the Kauravas labeled as bad and the Pandavas as good? Is there any book that tells this story from their perspective?
I think I mentioned briefly that not all Kauravas are bad all the time and not all Pandavas are good all the time. But you know something, it so happens that whosoever writes history, Vyasa wrote history, that Jay, because Pandavas asked him to. And therefore, have you seen movies like Great Escape based on Second World War? And there you will see, because Germany lost, they would show that Germans are not smart people. And every British and American person is smart, which was not the case, right? Similarly, all Kauravas were not bad, not all the time. But I also believe one thing, that I told you already that 100 doesn't mean 100, 100 means many. Sometimes I wonder whether the person who wrote this or who edited this wanted to give us the proportion of good and bad people in a society. If there are 5 good people, then there are hundreds of bad people. Probably even, excuse me. Even that could be one of the reasons. But believe me, I haven't gone into details. Kauravas were not all that bad. And do you think Yudhishthira, who gambled and put his brothers and his wife on stake, do you think he was a good person? Think for yourself.
Our final question for the day: can Mahabharata characters affect good or bad principles in someone's life and personalities? To end, what are some of the good qualities and the bad qualities that one must imbibe in themselves?
There are some qualities which Mahabharata definitely imbibes on your mind. For example, I always wonder, 100 Kauravas as brothers stayed together. 5 Pandavas as brothers and as a family, they stayed together. There was unionism in them. They never quarreled amongst themselves, right? Which is important. So, how to raise a family? One should learn from Kunti, Pandava's mother. There are many virtues. Imagine what has happened to Draupadi. Draupadi is said to be one of the greatest pativratas. Ahalya Draupadi Sita. The verse goes, it's very famous in Maharashtra. And therefore, a lot of things, it's impossible to say everything, but these are some of the things which are directly related to our family life. And so I said that.
With this, we conclude our Q&A session for the day. A video recording of this session will be made available to all our attendees over email.
Okay, can I say something? The Q&A session is, he said it's over, but the study of Mahabharata is not over. It has just begun. So do that. And if you have any questions or you need any assistance or help, please write to us and I'll be more than happy to respond. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. This is just the beginning, and we at NeuroShield will keep bringing you more interesting topics to vitalize your health, your brain health, and your happiness. Our email ID and website will be posted in the chat box. Kindly write to us. Thank you so much.